We have all been robbed. COVID-19 has costed the global economy over $16 trillion and nearly 4 million lives. When faced with tragedy, we must endeavor to learn from our mistakes, lest we repeat the cycles of history. COVID-19 has exposed many glaring flaws in our institutions, from healthcare to housing, but the largest shortcoming has been revealed in the inadequacy of our scientific and public health institutions. To understand more, we need to take a trip back to 2014. There was an outbreak of anthrax at a CDC lab where they were conducting gain-of-function research. The research was built on the premise that given the extraordinary rate of mutations in viruses, scientists should try to add their own mutations in a controlled setting to develop cures ahead of the next epidemic. Gain-of-function research literally adds new functionality to viruses, whether they be increased transmissibility, drug resistance, or symptoms. The goal was to have cures for diseases before they morphed into pandemics. Unfortunately, the CDC was not careful enough and carelessly created an outbreak of anthrax. Luckily, there were no fatalities, but the Obama administration directed the National Institute of Health to ban gain-of-function research. Fast forward to 2017, when the Trump administration repealed the Obama-era ban, we have a much different story. Peter Daszak, president of EcoHealth, a nonprofit research organization, took $7.5 million in funding from the NIH for gain-of-function research. $3.7 million went to the Wuhan Institute of Virology for research on respiratory viruses. In 2019, there were reports in Wuhan, China, of a new respiratory coronavirus transmitting between people, and you're familiar with the rest. There is enough information for us to ask if COVID-19 is the product of gain-of-function research and not zoonotic in nature. The Wuhan Institute of Virology denied any claims that they were working with live bats, but footage leaked to Sky News via Australia showed the lab had live bats fluttering within steel cages. Did SARS-CoV-2, the virus that caused COVID-19, come from a lab or a wet market in Wuhan? It's hard to say. The Biden administration has authorized a task force to investigate the lab leak hypothesis, but it's been a year and a half since the pandemic started. We might never know the full details. While a majority of scientists concur that COVID-19 is zoonotic, many, including Stanford professor and microbiologist David Relman, state that the last bit of evolution in the virus's genome could be the product of laboratory research. I must stress that we cannot jump to conclusions. COVID could have been leaked from a lab because scientists mishandled specimens taken from the wild. Instead of the origin of human contact being at a wet market, it could have been a lab coat. We don't know. Hopefully, research will elucidate our doubts and worries, but let's not be overly optimistic. The question I have for Daniel is, should we continue gain-of-function research, or should we scrap it?
Depends on the risk and reward, I guess.
Well, I'll tell you this. We have next to no rewards, no solutions, no breakthroughs from gain-of-function research, and the cost of gain-of-function research is $16 trillion and nearly 4 million lives.
I mean, I think then the solution seems pretty clear then.
Go back to the Obama-era ban?
Yeah, I mean, unless you could argue that we still haven't tapped into the true potential of gain-of-function research, and that the only reason we really didn't come up with anything from that is just because we haven't tried hard enough. Unless you make that argument, then
it's
sounds
possible.
like it's not worth it, I guess. But were there any other outbreaks other than this?
Yes.
Yeah, you said
there was a case of anthrax. There were cases of flus, bird flu in the 2009 H1N1, bird flu, and there was also a case of salmonella, I believe.
Okay.
Again, those were relatively small, but leaks are common because humans make mistakes. There's not a lot of oversight in gain-of-function research, and unfortunately, because this is such a hot button issue, there are a lot of people who are calling for banning gain-of-function research. I want to know what your take on it is. Is this the first time you're hearing of it?
Well, I know the gist of it.
Okay.
But, I mean, is there any way to? You said there's not much oversight in gain-of-function research. Is that seriously true? I mean, given that there's already been like flu outbreaks and anthrax outbreaks because of human error, then I feel like there should be more.
So again, you have to understand this was happening in Wuhan, the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Their standards for containment probably are a lot different than in the United States. The United States just banned gain-of-function research. There are other parts of the world where this research is happening all the time. I believe it was in almost every major city, there's at least one lab that's practicing gain-of-function research. in some capacity. So it seems as though this research is just going to happen, and it's not a question of if something escapes the lab or if there is a containment break. It's going to be a matter of when and how big. Because anthrax, at least, it can't become a pandemic. It doesn't spread quickly enough. It's deadly. You can sometimes save people who catch them early, but it's not going to spread. Something like smallpox, though, because both the United States and Russia have smallpox stored. They have samples of smallpox, and if they do gain of function research on that, they might risk having another outbreak of smallpox.
Yeah, this sort of reminds me of like nuclear weapons and nuclear research, because
Yes,
it's almost the exact same situation where there's potential for such benefit, but
the costs are so great.
So I don't know. Is there any way maybe like we could? I mean, everyone has PTSD from coronavirus right now, so maybe people will become more careful, or countries will implement more oversight and security measures for.
I would hope so.
The gain of function research.
But now it's the question of, should gain of function research even be valid? Yeah, should it be?
What do you mean valid?
So, okay, is it even a valid form of research we should engage in? Is it a good idea to engage in that type of research?
You said there's literally no advances. I kind of find that hard to believe, because like, why would they have labs in, like, you said there's research in like every lab. So there must be.
There's a little bit of hyperbole, but at least when I was finding the benefits of gain of function research, I literally asked evolutionary biologists if I could interview them on this for this podcast.
Really?
Yeah, I tried to. The funniest reply is, try looking into some more worthwhile avenues of research. That's the response that I got. So again, it's very hard for me to say this. My personal opinion is, and this is going to upset everyone, my opinion on both nuclear power and gain of function research is the same. We need it. So, Daniel, you're aware that in Siberia, the permafrost is melting, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So one of the issues there is that a lot of diseases are coming back because our bodies that were filled with diseases like smallpox and other eradicated diseases that are now being exposed, and we could have a potential outbreak of that disease. Let me tell you this. If the cost for averting a smallpox pandemic is COVID-19, I will pay that cost 10 times over. Because smallpox, at least the variola, the most common, has a common strain, has a 30% case fatality rating. The more hemorrhagic version has nearly 70%. If smallpox were to break, smallpox is also an airborne virus. Masks won't stop it. It'll linger in the air for days.
Okay, so
if that happens,
so COVID isn't airborne; it's like droplets.
Droplets, right? Yes. Smallpox is airborne. If smallpox does make a resurgence and we did not engage in gain of function, we could see quite literally the reduction of a quarter to half of all of human life on this planet. Given how integrated our supply chains are, given how easy it is to travel around the world, if smallpox spreads, it could be not the end of humanity, but a major setback in human evolution. It could be the second coming of the Black Plague, the Black Death to Electric Boogaloo. So if the cost of preventing that catastrophe is COVID-19, I will pay that cost. I think gain of function research is valid. I think I agree with you that we need to do everything in our power to regulate it properly so that we can contain this. We've had leaks at nuclear power plants, but to this day, nuclear power plants, one of the reasons why nuclear energy is so expensive is building the plants is very expensive. And building the plants are very expensive because we require so many security fail-safes. We need to do the same thing here. I want gain of function research to be done by some of the most reputed scientists in the most secure facilities on the planet. I don't care if those scientists have to live in bunkers 2 miles underneath the ground. I want to make sure that that is done. I want to invest in this research, and I think it is worthwhile. Unfortunately, my opinion is not politically feasible at all. I don't think it's going to happen because the Biden administration already cut funding to gain of function research, and it seems that governments around the world are also doing the same thing.
Like you said, it's sort of, I mean, they obviously have concern for another pandemic, but it's also a little bit virtue signaling, right? Like, even if, for example, they know about the potential of preventing another future disease by, coming up with a virus before it actually, vaccine. Okay, by coming up with a vaccine before it actually happens, the popularity of this is it's going to be so hard to pass through the government, right? No one's going to like it. So, anyway, you were saying the premise of you supporting this is that gain of function research has strong potential to be able to come up with this vaccine. Yet,
I don't think it has a strong potential because we haven't seen any results. Even if it's 1%, I'll take it. Because I view the second coming of smallpox as an existential crisis. A 1% chance to fight against it is huge, in my opinion.
Well, I guess how risky is the permafrost thing going to actually destroy the humans?
So again, this is once again, this has to be taken into the calculation.
Yeah, exactly.
From what I have read about the permafrost thing, scientists are very worried about it. They seem to be more worried about it than gain of function research. That's a threshold, at least for me. If the probability of smallpox coming back is greater than the probability of gain of function research causing another global pandemic, then let's go for it. Let's do. Because one is so much greater, that's not even easy to quantify. The costs for human civilization, for human society, for all of humanity, if half of us die,
you have to multiply the chance of the smallpox creating a pandemic with our chance of actually creating a vaccine to give. So, and then compare that to the chance of another pandemic caused by the gain of function.
I don't know how we could make a model to evaluate all of that.
I know, but you said if there's a 1% chance.
Hyperbole again. But look.
I know, but like
I don't know how you could even create a mathematical model to carefully weigh the risks and costs and the benefits. I don't know. Generally speaking, I operate by this rule. If a lot of scientists believe there's a positive NPV in doing it, then I suggest we go for it. What I did not like is people like Fauci, people like Peter Daszak. Fauci was one of the people who were lobbying the Trump administration to remove the restrictions on gain of function research. There are people like that who are not very transparent. I view them as bad actors. I require that I can trust scientists. I can do that. I just need them to be more transparent. Dr. Fauci has completely lost my trust in him forever. I just cannot trust a single thing that man says. He went onto a news program and he says, I represent science. If you criticize me, you criticize science. That is one of the most egotistical, moronic things I've ever heard. There are certain people who are just bad actors that you cannot trust. Dr. Fauci is one of them. But the actual scientific institutions, they need to do a better job at being transparent. I did not like the fact that the World Health Organization helped China cover and suppress some of the early outbreak information from coronavirus. I don't like the fact that there's no transparency from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, who told us, they straight-faced lie, that there were not bats being experimented on and then we have leaked footage, leaked to Sky News in Australia, that there were live bats in that facility. This lack of accountability is a huge problem. Any step forward, I need 100% accountability to make sure that this kind of situation doesn't happen again. Because when these things are done in the dark, we have consequences. We need adequate warning. There was so much misinformation going around, especially in the during the outbreak of COVID, about whether masks work or the origins or this theory. Some people believe that, it was a racist to suggest that this leaked out of a lab in China, whereas it was not racist to say that, this was because Chinese people were eating bats. There's too much. The news establishment, the medical establishment, they were playing games instead of just being honest and transparent about what was happening. Their fear of a public backlash has completely eroded their trust in a way far greater than any public backlash. I think that we need good actors in this. There needs to be a systemic review, an audit of all of these actors, who did what they knew. The leaked Fauci emails show that Dr. Fauci knew about all the gain of function research done in this Wuhan lab. He was in contact with Peter Daszak. Apparently, they were close friends. There's just not enough transparency to continue business as usual. My argument is not we go back to business as usual with gain of function research. There need to be intense reforms. We need to make sure the medical establishment is cleaned. We need to make sure that there is strong regulations and strong transparency guidelines to make sure this never happens again. And someone like Dr. Fauci cannot be in charge of that institution. What's your take on this, Daniel? Do you disagree with me?
Yeah, if we get to a point where the regulations are strong enough to prevent another outbreak like COVID, then yeah, I say why not? If there's a chance of preventing another future pandemic from, like you said, smallpox from the permafrost or something. Yeah. I think it's a reasonable take.
Yeah. I try not to be emotional about this, but I am so deeply upset with just being lied to. I would prefer if we had one concrete, transparent narrative, but it seems that these medical institutions, and look, they're fighting over a couple $1 million worth of funding. Yet in 2019, there was a $180 billion increase to the military spending budget in the United States. We need more transparency, and we can afford to take the costs to improve our public health.
Okay.
But they're not good actors that we can trust, and that's a big worry for me. Because here's the thing, right? I'm relatively amenable to science. A random redneck in Tennessee? Oh. Good luck convincing them that vaccines don't cause autism. That was already a struggle. Good luck convincing them that this vaccine doesn't have a microchip from Bill Gates. It's already hard enough to do that. This is just conspiracy bait. This lack of accountability, lack of transparency is the bait for conspiracy theorists who are going to send ridiculous misinformation over WhatsApp. I don't know if you ever heard of this documentary called Plandemic, where they actually talked about some of these things. They said, oh, Fauci was friends with Peter Daszak, Wuhan Institute of Virology. He knew a lot about this. There was so much information there. But in the middle of it, there was one lady who says, wearing the mask activates your own virus. And it just, my God, how could you say some right things but said 50 fucking wrong ones? This is what happens. If we do not have proper honesty, liars and charlatans will rule the internet. I cannot forgive Dr. Fauci for lying about masks. That, and on top of that, him being transparent about the gain of function research, and now his egotistical remarks of saying, I am science. Fuck Fauci. Hashtag fuck Fauci. This is probably going to be our most controversial episode. I love this.